Before a Sigma male detaches, he doesn't just disappear. He evolves through phases that silently reshape who he is. The world sees only the final moment, the quiet withdrawal, the vanishing of effort, but they miss the internal journey that leads him there. A Sigma doesn't detach because he stops caring. He detaches because he finally sees the truth with clarity too sharp to ignore. He moves from observation to realization, from patience to exhaustion, from giving to protecting, until eventually the emotional door closes without a sound. By the time people notice the shift, he is already in a different phase of himself, calmer, colder, sharper, and unreachable. These 5 phases are not reactions. They are transformations, and once he completes them, he never returns to who he was before. If this resonates, drop one word in the comments. Phased. And your question is, which phase do you feel you're in right now? Make sure you subscribe to Silent Wise, where every quiet transformation becomes power. He notices subtle shifts in behavior, energy, and respect. The first signs something is off. The Sigma male never detaches suddenly. The unraveling begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, in moments most people overlook. His intuition is his earliest warning system, and it starts firing long before his mind fully understands why. He notices the slight changes first, the pauses in conversation that used to be warm but now feel weighted, the difference in tone that no one else catches, the way someone's eyes drift instead of meeting his directly. These shifts aren't dramatic, they're subtle. The kind that only someone who pays attention to patterns rather than excuses can detect. And because the Sigma reads energy more clearly than words, he feels the imbalance before anyone speaks it aloud. He senses when respect begins to crack, even slightly. Maybe someone's responses become shorter, edged with entitlement. Maybe their gratitude fades and is replaced with expectation. Maybe their effort drops while their demands rise. The Sigma notices every change in consistency. Who stops showing up, who stops listening, who starts taking more than they give. These small fractures may seem insignificant to others, but to him, they signal the beginning of a larger truth. The dynamic is shifting, and not in a direction that honors who he is. As he observes these changes, a quiet distance forms inside him. Not because he wants to pull away, but because something in him begins preparing for the possibility that he may need to. His awareness becomes sharper, more attuned, more deliberate. He pays attention to how often someone interrupts him now compared to before, how their energy feels rushed or careless, how their presence starts to drain instead of recharge him. He notices disrespect not in obvious insults, but in the erosion of small courtesies that once came naturally. And what makes this phase so powerful is that he does not react. He does not confront immediately. He does not express disappointment or demand explanations. Instead, he watches. He listens. He collects evidence in silence. Because the Sigma knows that truth reveals itself without force. People expose themselves through patterns, not promises. The more he observes, the clearer the picture becomes. By the time others realize something is wrong, he has already mapped the entire shift with precision. This first phase is not detachment, it is awakening. It is the Sigma recognizing the earliest signs that a connection or environment is no longer aligned with the respect, energy, or balance he once offered freely. And once he sees the truth, even in its earliest form, he cannot unsee it. He begins withdrawing emotionally to observe without interference, seeing truths he missed before. Once a Sigma male senses that something no longer aligns, he doesn't confront it head-on. He steps back internally, creating an emotional distance that allows him to see the situation with precision instead of attachment. This withdrawal isn't coldness, it's clarity. He quietly detaches from the emotional currents that once blurred his judgment, and in that space of stillness, the world around him becomes sharper, revealing truths he couldn't see while he was invested. The Sigma observes not to judge, but to understand, and with every step backward, he gains a wider view of dynamics he once stood too close to. As he withdraws, his reactions soften while his awareness expands. He no longer responds with instant empathy or automatic support. He listens more and speaks less. He watches how people behave when he stops giving them the emotional feedback they relied on, and it's in this silence that contradictions begin to surface. He notices who only valued him when he was available. He notices who grows uncomfortable when they no longer have access to his emotional attention. He notices who reveals impatience, entitlement, or frustration when he stops cushioning their behavior. With the emotional fog lifted, their patterns become unmistakable. This emotional retreat becomes his observatory, a vantage point where nothing gets past him. He watches how people talk about responsibility, yet avoid it. How they claim loyalty, yet act inconsistently. How they express affection, yet withhold effort. Without his emotional presence smoothing the rough edges, their truth emerges naturally. People often mistake his calm withdrawal for passivity, not realizing he's recording everything with quiet accuracy. What they don't understand is that the Sigma learns more from silence than from confrontation. He also begins noticing his own truths, the ways he overextended, the boundaries he ignored, the emotional weight he carried without recognition. He sees how much of himself he gave to maintain harmony that others did not match. And with every realization, his emotional distance deepens, not out of resentment, but out of self-respect. He becomes an observer of his own life, no longer a participant in dynamics that drain him. This phase is powerful because it transforms confusion into certainty. His withdrawal is not an ending, it is a diagnostic. He steps back to let the truth speak for itself. And once he sees the full picture, unfiltered, undeniable, and unromanticized, he prepares for the next phase, deciding what or who is no longer worthy of his inner world. He reevaluates the relationship or environment, realizing the imbalance he once tolerated. When a Sigma male reaches this phase, his clarity sharpens into something undeniable. The emotional distance he created wasn't just to observe others, it was to observe himself, his patterns, and the silent compromises he made without noticing. Now, with calm detachment, he walks back through the history of the connection. The moments he gave more than he received, the times he listened while no one listened to him, the emotional labor he carried without acknowledgement. This reevaluation is not dramatic or sentimental. It is precise, almost surgical. He measures the relationship not by what was promised, but by what was consistently delivered. As he revisits the imbalance, he sees how much he normalized. He remembers the excuses he made for other people's behavior, the benefit of the doubt he offered repeatedly, the subtle ways his time, energy, and peace were taken for granted. For the first time, he recognizes the quiet exhaustion he carried, the weight that felt normal only because he shouldered it for so long. And the more he examines it, the more obvious it becomes. He was investing in something that never invested equally in him. This phase reveals truths he once overlooked because he cared, because he hoped, because he wanted to believe the best in people. But now, stripped of emotional bias, he sees the dynamics clearly. He sees who depended on his patience instead of growing. He sees who relied on his silence to avoid accountability. He sees who expected him to adapt while offering little adaptation in return. The imbalance is no longer a vague feeling. It becomes a mapped-out pattern, undeniable and unsustainable. He also reevaluates himself in this process. He questions why he tolerated so much, why he kept giving even when it depleted him, why he accepted crumbs while offering loyalty, stability, and depth. This isn't self-blame, it's self-awakening. The Sigma realizes that the imbalance didn't only come from others, it persisted because he allowed it, believing that understanding was the same as reciprocity. Now he knows better. By the end of this introspective evaluation, something fundamental shifts. His emotional attachment dissolves, his tolerance evaporates. The relationship or environment he once tried to maintain can no longer hold him because he now sees it for what it truly is, not what he hoped it could be. And once a Sigma recognizes imbalance, he doesn't argue, negotiate, or plead for fairness. He prepares to walk away, quietly, decisively, permanently. He disconnects internally long before he leaves physically. Detachment begins in the mind. A Sigma male never walks away suddenly, long before he physically removes himself from a relationship, a friendship, a job, or an environment. Something inside him has already shifted. His withdrawal does not start with distance. It starts with thought. The moment he realizes the connection no longer aligns with his values or peace, he begins an internal process the outside world cannot see. His mind, once open and receptive, becomes observant and guarded. His heart, once available, becomes selective. His intuition, once soft, becomes sharp. This silent detachment is the turning point, and no one recognizes it until it is far too late. Inside, he begins to let go piece by piece. He stops imagining a future with the person or place he's outgrown. He stops investing emotional energy into fixing what has shown no desire to change. He stops replaying arguments in his head or giving the benefit of the doubt where it has been repeatedly wasted. Instead of reaching out, he withdraws. Instead of explaining, he accepts. Instead of fighting for balance, he watches the imbalance speak for itself. His internal world becomes a sanctuary again, one he no longer allows others to disturb. Externally, he appears calm, perhaps even unchanged. He still shows up, still speaks with measured politeness, still goes through the motions. But internally, the ties are dissolving. The emotional cords that once held him to the relationship loosen quietly. His reactions become lighter because he is no longer invested. His silence grows deeper because words are no longer worth offering. His presence becomes neutral, not because he has given up on himself, but because he has given up on the possibility that the dynamic can be repaired. This internal disconnect is often mistaken for moodiness or distance, but it is far more final. A Sigma does not detach to punish. He detaches because he sees the truth clearly and cannot unsee it. He knows the mind leaves before the body ever does. And once his mind is gone, once his emotional connection dissolves, no apology, no promise, no momentary kindness can rebuild what has already died inside him. By the time he physically walks away, the real departure happened weeks or months earlier. His silence was the signal. His stillness was the warning. His emotional neutrality was the farewell. And because detachment begins in the mind, once a Sigma reaches this stage, he never returns to the version of himself who once cared so deeply. He reaches a final clarity. Protecting his peace matters more than preserving any connection. The final phase is not emotional, it is philosophical. When a Sigma male reaches this point, something fundamental recalibrates inside him. The confusion is gone. The hesitation disappears. The internal debate ends. He sees, with absolute clarity, that no relationship, no bond, no history is worth sacrificing his inner stability for. Peace becomes his compass, his standard, his non-negotiable. Connections that require self-betrayal dissolve instantly in this new light. And the Sigma realizes something he ignored for too long. The cost of staying was far greater than the cost of leaving. This clarity doesn't arrive with anger. It arrives with calm. The storm that once raged inside him, trying to justify others, trying to repair imbalance, trying to stay loyal to his own pain, finally settles. He understands that his energy is finite, his emotional bandwidth precious, and his time irreplaceable. Anyone or anything that repeatedly disrupts his equilibrium is no longer a challenge to fix, but a boundary to enforce. Protecting his peace is no longer optional. It is survival. As he embraces this truth, all emotional attachment to the connection fades. The person or environment loses the power to affect him. He no longer hopes for change, no longer waits for respect, no longer invests in potential that never materialized. This clarity liberates him. He stops seeing departure as failure and starts seeing it as alignment. His peace becomes the measure by which everything else is evaluated, and very few things survive this standard. Once he reaches this phase, his detachment becomes complete. There is no dramatic goodbye, no emotional explosion, no final confrontation. He simply steps back, quietly and firmly, choosing himself in a way he once didn't know he was allowed to. Others may interpret his departure as coldness, but it is actually the purest form of self-respect. He is not leaving them behind, he is returning to himself. And the most powerful truth is this: once a Sigma male reaches this level of clarity, he never goes back. Not to old patterns, not to imbalanced connections, not to places that dimmed him. Peace becomes his home, and anything that threatens it is no longer given access. Protecting his inner world becomes his final act of strength, an act that marks the completion of his detachment and the beginning of a new, unshakable chapter. When a Sigma male reaches this final stage, the story is no longer about who he walked away from. It's about who he finally became. The detachment wasn't punishment, it was evolution. It was the quiet moment he chose peace over pressure, clarity over confusion, and self-respect over emotional debt. And once he makes that decision, his path narrows, sharpens, and transforms into something only he can walk. He doesn't return to what drained him. He doesn't negotiate with what harmed him. He doesn't explain what he outgrew. His silence becomes his closure, and his growth becomes the proof that he made the right choice. If this message resonated with you, comment clarity so I know you're walking your own path of detachment and self-respect. And tell me, which phase are you in right now? Make sure to subscribe to Silent Wise for more deep insights into the Sigma mindset.